Something incredible has just happened to 3i Atlas as space descends into chaos. The question that immediately arises is, how can an object traveling through the cosmic abysses disrupt the calm of an entire galactic system? To understand this, we must first meet the man who will be the central theme of this story. A young man named Adrian, aged 26, whose life has been marked since childhood by an insatiable curiosity about the universe. Adrian had always felt that his destiny was tied to the secrets of the stars. Ever since he was a small child in a quiet village surrounded by mountains, he spent his nights gazing at the sky and wondering what hidden forces could be moving those distant lights. Could there be something beyond what telescopes show us? Could there be a hidden message in the movement of celestial bodies? Those questions never left him. When news of 3i Atlas broke in the scientific media, Adrian couldn't help but feel that this was the signal he'd been waiting for. Why was this particular object sparking so much interest? After all, other interstellar visitors had already appeared in history, but this one seemed different, seeming to carry with it a trace that didn't fit with what was known. What sets 3i Atlas apart from all that has gone before? That's the first question that will accompany our journey. While the observatories were collecting data, Adrian searched digital libraries for the oldest records. He found references from hundreds of years ago that spoke of mysterious lights in the sky, of wandering travelers who didn't belong in the solar neighborhood. Could those old chronicles be related to what's happening now? As he read, he noticed disturbing coincidences, descriptions of luminous tails, impossible trajectories, and movements that defied logic. Is it possible that humanity had seen 3i Atlas before, but couldn't give it a name? The young man began keeping a journal, convinced he must record every clue. In those pages, he constantly asked himself questions. What if this object weren't simply a comet or an asteroid? What would be the implications if it were artificial? And if it really was engineered, who would have built it, and for what purpose? These questions kept him awake until the early hours of the morning, while everything outside remained silent. The signals coming from the astronomical instruments were increasingly disconcerting. The object's acceleration didn't match traditional laws, and the expulsion of gases didn't follow common patterns. Adrian wondered, does the universe harbor propulsion mechanisms we don't know about? Could physics, as we understand it, be incomplete? These questions were profound, but he tried to answer them with the serenity of someone who knows that the truth takes time to reveal itself. In the midst of his research, Adrian recalled an episode from his childhood. One night, when he was barely 10 years old, he saw a shooting star so bright that it lit up the entire valley. His grandfather, sitting next to him, told him that not all shooting lights were the same, that some carried messages from other worlds. That phrase remained engraved in his memory, and now it took on new meaning. Could it be that Atlas carried a similar message, but addressed to all of humanity? As the days passed, chaos began to take hold of the scientific community. Contradictory theories emerged one after another. Some said it was a natural object with unusual characteristics. Others claimed it was an interstellar artifact, and still others feared that its trajectory would lead it to collide with Mars. Adrian wondered how a single presence in the sky could generate so much confusion? And even more so, what was this visitor trying to teach us? The silence of dawn accompanied his reflections. Every time he closed his eyes, he imagined Atlas's journey across billions of kilometers, traversing dark regions, dodging stars, carrying a secret that no one could yet decipher. What if the chaos we perceive is nothing more than the universe's way of reminding us that we still know very little? Thus began for Adrian a path of discovery that would lead him to confront mysteries greater than he ever imagined. The story of the 31st Atlas was not only about a moving object, but about the fragility of our certainties and the vastness of what remains to be explored. The questions will continue to appear, but little by little, like the stars that light up one by one in the night, they will find answers that will illuminate their journey. Do you want me to continue expanding this narrative to a full 25,000-word story in this same style of calm tone, intriguing questions, and slow development? Adrian continued his research, but uncertainty increasingly plagued him. Over the months, the data the astronomers received became more and more disconcerting. 3i Atlas seemed to change course without any logical explanation. Was it possible that the laws of the universe were being altered by a force we don't understand? What if the scientists were looking at the object from the wrong angle? That doubt became an obsession. Perhaps it wasn't something out of the ordinary, but something that only seemed strange to us because our understanding of the universe was limited. As time passed, the skies became more active. The study of 3i Atlas went from being a topic of debate in scientific circles to becoming a global conversation. Major space agencies began collaborating, sharing data and theories about the object. But despite all the progress, one question remained unanswered. Where did 3i Atlas really come from? Every time Adrian thought he had found a clue, more questions arose. It was at that moment that an old article he had found by chance caught his attention. It talked about cosmic phenomena similar to 3i Atlas that dated back centuries, but with one fundamental difference. These objects seemed to have a purpose. They didn't just travel through space, but their trajectories were calculated, as if someone or something was guiding them. Could it be that 3i Atlas wasn't a cosmic accident, but a piece of a much larger puzzle? What if we humans were only seeing a tiny fraction of something much larger? Adrian couldn't get that thought out of his head. He decided he had to find an answer. Every night he spent hours observing the skies with his telescope, waiting for something to happen, something that would guide him to the answer. Astronomers around the world were also on alert, but despite all their efforts, 3i Atlas continued to behave in an inexplicable way. Meanwhile, the scientific community was divided into two groups. Some maintained that the object was a simple comet, one of many traveling through the solar system, but on an atypical trajectory. Others, however, were convinced that 3i Atlas represented something much more complex. And here the crucial question arose. If 3i Atlas wasn't a simple comet, what was it? Adrian felt he was close to uncovering the truth. He delved into ancient texts and theories that spoke of objects like 3i Atlas. Some mentioned objects that throughout history had approached Earth at key moments. These phenomena seemed to have a profound impact on humanity. Could it be possible that 3i Atlas was doing the same thing, but on a cosmic level? Could there be greater influences than simply an object traveling through space? These were the questions that kept him awake. One night, while reflecting on everything he had learned, he remembered something crucial. The earliest astronomers, those who observed the sky long before modern telescopes existed, had already noticed strange patterns in the cosmos. They knew that space wasn't just empty, but filled with unseen influences. What if 3i Atlas wasn't just an object, but a sign of something much larger that we couldn't yet understand? As the weeks passed, the data continued to flow, but the answer continued to elude them. However, Adrian began to realize something important. Perhaps the answer lay not in science, but in the way we observe the universe. What if scientists had focused too much on the details, forgetting the most important thing, the connection between everything that exists? The questions kept piling up. Why did the object seem to be accelerating? Why didn't it follow known physical laws? Was it possible that 3i Atlas was transmitting a message, not just to scientists, but to all of humanity? Chaos in space wasn't just a natural phenomenon. It was a reminder of our own small position in an infinite universe. And perhaps, like Adrian, all human beings were destined to discover something far greater than we had imagined. In the days that followed, space observatories continued to monitor the object, but answers didn't come. However, one thought began to form in Adrian's mind. Sometimes the answers aren't as clear as we hope, and what's important isn't the immediate answer, but the journey of discovery we undertake in searching for it. Perhaps 3i Atlas wasn't meant to be understood immediately. Perhaps its appearance in the sky was simply an invitation to question our assumptions and look at the cosmos with a more open mind. Adrian then decided to take a step back, moving away from hard science and into more philosophical territory. If 3i Atlas was truly disrupting the chaos of space, perhaps it was doing so because it was reminding us of what we don't yet know. And if that was its purpose, Adrian couldn't be more grateful. As Adrian delved deeper into his reflections, he began to wonder if 3i Atlas was not just a cosmic anomaly, but a key, a catalyst for something much larger that only scientists could decipher. Throughout history, humans have encountered mysterious signs in the sky, often taken as omens or simple coincidences. But what if all of this was connected in a much deeper way than we think? What if 3i Atlas was an invitation to a collective awakening, something that pushed us to question our perception of the universe? On the other hand, the scientific community continued to struggle to make sense of the conflicting data. While some argued that 3i Atlas was merely a rogue comet with unexplained acceleration, others maintained that, given its behavior, it couldn't possibly be something natural. What if, somehow, the object was a sign of extraterrestrial life? Theories on this subject were beginning to gain traction, although most experts preferred not to go that far. But Adrian couldn't stop imagining what this would entail. If 3i Atlas were a ship or a signal, what implications would it have for humanity? Are we ready to know that we are not alone in the universe? Meanwhile, the object continued on its course. It didn't stop, it didn't waver. Its behavior, though unpredictable, seemed to have a purpose. That's what puzzled Adrian most. It didn't seem to follow the known laws of space, but in its own way, everything seemed to fit together, though no one could understand how. The days passed, and the uncertainty remained. but also a sense that something bigger was at play. Astrophysicists began to gather more data, but no one had a clear answer. Some said the object's nature was beyond human understanding. Others even went so far as to suggest that 3I Atlas's erratic behavior could be related to a possible change in the fundamental laws of space-time. The question was on everyone's mind. Is it possible that 3I Atlas is defying the laws of physics as we know them? Adrian, always so meticulous and thoughtful, couldn't ignore the growing feeling that 3I Atlas represented something much bigger than a simple anomaly in the cosmos. He wondered if he was witnessing a phenomenon that could redefine our understanding of the universe. If 3I Atlas was indeed proof that the laws governing the cosmos could be altered, what other hidden truths remained to be discovered? Throughout his life, he had always felt that the universe was full of secrets, and now, for the first time, it seemed he was about to uncover one of them. The chaos surrounding the study of the 3I Atlas showed no signs of abating. As scientists struggled to find a logical explanation, Adrian's thoughts revolved around the paradox of the unknown. How prepared were we to face what we don't yet understand? Were we really ready to accept that the universe isn't what we think it is? These questions remained unanswered, but Adrian was beginning to understand something important. Sometimes the answer isn't in the object itself, but in the internal transformation it provokes in those who study it. By observing the 3I Atlas, humanity wasn't just searching for answers. It was changing, evolving into a new phase of knowledge and understanding. Adrian's unease turned into a mixture of wonder and resignation. Theories piled up, but Atlas's behavior remained the same. It accelerated, changed course without explanation, and its tail, composed of strange gases, continued to grow. It was an object in constant motion, but with a purpose that could not be understood. At that moment, Adrian realized something profound. Perhaps not everything in the universe was meant to be understood immediately. Perhaps, as human beings, our role wasn't necessarily to find all the answers, but to learn to ask the right questions. The entire world watched the object with growing fascination. Theories about its origin, nature, and purpose multiplied. Some clung to the idea that 3I Atlas was simply a natural phenomenon, but others couldn't stop wondering if this cosmic visitor was trying to teach us something. Adrian began writing in his journal more frequently, noting not only the scientific data, but also his philosophical thoughts on the meaning of it all. Within its pages, a recurring question seemed to emerge with each new reflection. Are we destined to understand everything the universe has to offer us? Or are there mysteries we simply cannot unravel? Meanwhile, 3I Atlas continued on its way, and humanity, little by little, began to accept that the answers might not come as soon as they expected. Adrian, for his part, decided that the most important thing wasn't to reach an immediate conclusion, but to keep observing, keep learning, keep asking questions. Sometimes, the most meaningful thing about a mystery isn't the answer, but the journey of discovery that leads us through it. And in the end, perhaps that's the true lesson 3I Atlas had to offer. As Adrian delved deeper into his reflections, he began to wonder if 3I Atlas was not just a cosmic anomaly, but a key, a catalyst for something much larger that only scientists could decipher. Throughout history, humans have encountered mysterious signs in the sky, often taken as omens or simple coincidences. But what if all of this was connected in a much deeper way than we think? What if Three-Eye Atlas was an invitation to a collective awakening, something that pushed us to question our perception of the universe? On the other hand, the scientific community continued to struggle to make sense of the conflicting data. While some argued that Three-Eye Atlas was merely a rogue comet with unexplained acceleration, others maintained that, given its behavior, it couldn't possibly be something natural. What if, somehow, the object was a sign of extraterrestrial life? Theories on this subject were beginning to gain traction, although most experts preferred not to go that far. But Adrian couldn't stop imagining what this would entail. If Three-Eye Atlas were a ship or a signal, what implications would it have for humanity? Are we ready to know that we are not alone in the universe? Meanwhile, the object continued on its course. It didn't stop. It didn't waver. Its behavior, though unpredictable, seemed to have a purpose. That's what puzzled Adrian most. It didn't seem to follow the known laws of space, but in its own way, everything seemed to fit together, though no one could understand how. The days passed, and the uncertainty remained, but also a sense that something bigger was at play. Astrophysicists began to gather more data, but no one had a clear answer. Some said the object's nature was beyond human understanding. Others even went so far as to suggest that Three-Eye Atlas's erratic behavior could be related to a possible change in the fundamental laws of space-time. The question was on everyone's mind. Is it possible that Three-Eye Atlas is defying the laws of physics as we know them? Adrian, always so meticulous and thoughtful, couldn't ignore the growing feeling that Three-Eye Atlas represented something much bigger than a simple anomaly in the cosmos. He wondered if he was witnessing a phenomenon that could redefine our understanding of the universe. If Three-Eye Atlas was indeed proof that the laws governing the cosmos could be altered, what other hidden truths remained to be discovered? Throughout his life, he had always felt that the universe was full of secrets, and now, for the first time, it seemed he was about to uncover one of them. The chaos surrounding the study of the Three-Eye Atlas showed no signs of abating. As scientists struggled to find a logical explanation, Adrian's thoughts revolved around the paradox of the unknown. How prepared were we to face what we don't yet understand? Were we really ready to accept that the universe isn't what we think it is? These questions remained unanswered. But Adrian was beginning to understand something important. Sometimes the answer isn't in the object itself, but in the internal transformation it provokes in those who study it. By observing the Three-Eye Atlas, humanity wasn't just searching for answers. It was changing, evolving into a new phase of knowledge and understanding. Adrian's unease turned into a mixture of wonder and resignation. Theories piled up, but Atlas's behavior remained the same. It accelerated, changed course without explanation, and its tail, composed of strange gases, continued to grow. It was an object in constant motion, but with a purpose that could not be understood. At that moment, Adrian realized something profound. Perhaps not everything in the universe was meant to be understood immediately. Perhaps as human beings, our role wasn't necessarily to find all the answers, but to learn to ask the right questions. The entire world watched the object with growing fascination. Theories about its origin, nature, and purpose multiplied. Some clung to the idea that Three-Eye Atlas was simply a natural phenomenon. But others couldn't stop wondering if this cosmic visitor was trying to teach us something. Adrian began writing in his journal more frequently, noting not only the scientific data, but also his philosophical thoughts on the meaning of it all. Within its pages, a recurring question seemed to emerge with each new reflection. Are we destined to understand everything the universe has to offer us? Or are there mysteries we simply cannot unravel? Meanwhile, 3i Atlas continued on its way, and humanity, little by little, began to accept that the answers might not come as soon as they expected. Adrian, for his part, decided that the most important thing wasn't to reach an immediate conclusion, but to keep observing, keep learning, keep asking questions. Sometimes, the most meaningful thing about a mystery isn't the answer, but the journey of discovery that leads us through it. And in the end, perhaps that's the true lesson 3i Atlas had to offer. As the days passed, the global perception of 3i Atlas transformed. What initially seemed like a strange and isolated phenomenon became a catalyst for a new way of seeing the cosmos. The questions Adrian had been asking in his journal no longer only resonated in his mind, but also echoed in thousands of voices around the world. Scientists, philosophers, and thinkers of all kinds began to speculate about the implications of 3i Atlas. No one had definitive answers, but everyone agreed on one thing. Something profound was happening, something that transcended science as we know it. Adrian, deep in his own reflective process, realized something crucial. He had begun to see the universe as an interconnected whole, a cosmic fabric that was not only governed by physical laws, but also responded to more subtle forces. Could it be that 3i Atlas was a testament to the fragility of our understanding, a reminder that what we know is only a fraction of the vastness that surrounds us? The answers remained elusive, but Adrian understood that true wisdom lay not in cold, hard facts, but in the ability to accept the unknown with humility. In the following months, 3i Atlas continued its wanderings through space. Uncertainty remained a constant, but something began to change in Adrian's attitude. He no longer felt the pressure to find an immediate answer. Instead of desperately searching for a solution, he allowed himself to simply be part of the mystery, the wonder of the cosmos. And it was there, in that space of acceptance, that he began to perceive the true meaning of it all. As observatories continued to monitor the object, it became clear that 3i Atlas was not only altering our understanding of the cosmos, but also how we see ourselves. Humanity, in its quest to understand it, began to question, do we truly know the universe, or have we merely been observing a tiny fraction of it? This concern, far from being a source of anguish, began to generate a sense of curiosity and wonder, something that Adrian, in his journal, described as a collective awakening. On one of his nights of observation, while staring at the starry sky, Adrian had a revelation. The stars, the planets, the galaxies, they weren't just objects in space, but symbols of something larger, something that couldn't be measured or seen, but was there, implicit in the very fabric of the universe. What did it all mean? Why had 3i Atlas come to us, defying known laws? The answer, he thought, wasn't something that could be discovered with cold data or mathematical formulas. It was something that could only be understood when humanity began to look beyond the limitations of traditional thinking. As the weeks passed, news of 3i Atlas spread even further. More and more people began to take an interest in the object, not just as an astronomical phenomenon, but as a symbol of humanity's constant quest to understand what lies beyond its reach. Questions kept arising, but Adrian realized that perhaps the real key wasn't finding answers, but learning to live with uncertainty, with the fascination it brings. After all, isn't that the essence of the universe itself? A vast space filled with endless questions, unsolved mysteries, inviting us to explore, to learn, to dream. Throughout his life, Adrian had learned that knowledge isn't always something that comes quickly. Sometimes the most significant discoveries come when we least expect them, when we allow ourselves to be at peace with what we don't know. And that was what, ultimately, gave him peace in his quest. Atlas wasn't just an object in the sky. It wasn't just a cosmic anomaly. It was an invitation to question, to dream, to look beyond the obvious. Suddenly the chaos of space didn't seem so chaotic anymore. Atlas's journey through the stars, with its erratic behavior and mysterious nature, had awakened a collective consciousness. Humans no longer saw the cosmos merely as a field of study, but as a vast expanse filled with possibilities, a place where mysteries were not to be feared, but to be explored. Adrian had finally understood that chaos is nothing more than the expression of a still unknown order, waiting to be discovered by those brave enough to ask. So even as 3i Atlas continued on its way through space, its impact had already been felt on Earth. In every observatory, in every curious mind, in every conversation about the cosmos, there was a spark of deeper understanding, of humility at the magnitude of the unknown. 3i Atlas, the cosmic visitor that had defied all expectations, was not just an object in the sky, but a gateway to something far greater. And the most astonishing thing of all is that in the end, the only thing that truly mattered was not what would happen to 3i Atlas, but how this phenomenon had changed the way we see the universe. Adrian, as he gazed at the sky one more night, realized he no longer needed definitive answers. The search, the questioning, the constant wonder, that was what truly mattered. And in his heart, he knew that Atlas, though distant and mysterious, would always be a part of his personal story, an eternal invitation to look beyond. As the days passed, Adrian realized something fundamental. Atlas was no longer just a cosmic phenomenon, an object from outer space that defied all known laws. It had transcended that. It had become a metaphor for what humanity needed to learn, to accept the unknown, to embrace uncertainty. Throughout his life, Adrian had believed that knowledge was the ultimate goal of everything, but now he understood that, in reality, true value lay in the constant search, in the process of exploration, in the act of questioning, in never settling for the first answers, but in continuing to investigate without fear of the unknown. The scientific community continued to study 3i Atlas, but their theories and models, though complex and detailed, were beginning to be overwhelmed by the object's unpredictable nature. What if 3i Atlas was something completely different from what everyone imagined? Perhaps it didn't need a logical explanation. Perhaps all it asked for was to be contemplated, to be observed as it traveled, as a reminder that the universe is far more vast and mysterious than we can understand. Over the years, Adrian had learned that the universe wasn't necessarily governed by a series of clear answers, but rather by the questions that arise in the human mind, by that eternal curiosity that drives us to look up, to discover what lies beyond. The day he understood this, something changed in him. The feeling of chasing something bigger than himself, something that couldn't be captured or categorized, gave him a profound peace. He no longer felt that constant need to find certainties. Instead, he allowed himself to enjoy contemplating the mystery, knowing that the greatness of the universe lies in what remains beyond our reach. Space continued its silent dance as Atlas wended its way through the depths of the cosmos. The mystery of its origin remained unsolved, but Adrian was no longer frustrated by it. Sometimes answers didn't come immediately. Sometimes you just had to learn to be silent, to listen to the whisper of the universe, to accept that what seemed like meaningless chaos could actually be a deeper harmony, one that could only be understood with the passage of time. News about Three-Eye Atlas no longer dominated the front pages, but its imprint remained, albeit silently, in the minds of those who had touched the subject. The cosmic chaos that had initially caused such a stir had become a quiet reflection, one that invited humanity to reconsider its place in the vastness of space. If Three-Eye Atlas represented anything, it was the capacity of human beings to look up and question, to understand that we didn't yet know everything, but that this shouldn't be a cause for despair, but rather wonder. Adrian realized that Atlas had not only changed the way he viewed the cosmos, but also the way he understood life itself. Perhaps throughout his life, he had always been searching for definitive answers, but now he understood that the true beauty of knowledge lay not in conclusions, but in questions. Questions were what truly kept us alive, what pushed us forward, and in the end, that was what made the whole journey worthwhile. On quiet nights, as he watched the stars from his window, Adrian no longer felt that urgency to find all the answers. He knew that the universe was a vast canvas full of mystery, and that each small discovery was just a brushstroke in a painting that would never be finished. Three-Eye Atlas, on his wandering path through space, had taught him that the most important thing was not knowing the end of the journey, but understanding the value of the journey itself. And so, in his heart, Adrian accepted the greatest lesson that Three-Eye Atlas had come to teach us. There is no greater revelation than the constant wonder at what remains to be discovered. The cosmos continued on its course, and 31 Atlas, its tail of gases glowing in the darkness of space, slowly receded. But the mystery persisted, not because the answers were hidden within the object itself, but because the universe, in its infinite vastness, will always hold more questions than answers. And that, Adrian thought with a calm smile, is the true wonder of the cosmos. Knowing that there will always be something new to discover, something we don't yet understand, but which invites us to keep searching, to keep looking toward the stars. As Adrian continued to reflect, life went on. The sense of stillness he had experienced in understanding that the universe was not required to provide immediate answers brought him a profound peace. Now, he was not just an observer of the sky, but also a participant in the great mystery surrounding it. In his mind, there was no longer the anxiety of solving what the 31st Atlas represented. Instead, he found comfort in uncertainty, knowing that the universe was not meant to be explained, but simply experienced. News about Three-Eye Atlas continued to be a topic of discussion in scientific circles, but public interest had waned. No one knew for sure what would happen to the object, or why its trajectory seemed so unpredictable. Despite everything, questions continued to hang in the air, like whispers of a wisdom beyond our understanding. Would Three-Eye Atlas be just a fleeting visitor, or would it mark the beginning of a new era of discovery? Speculation about its origin multiplied, but as always with cosmic mysteries, no single answer seemed to be enough. Adrian continued observing, and over time, the stars stopped being just distant dots. They became symbols of the human quest, of that eternal need to find meaning, even when there were no clear answers. In every star, in every corner of the sky, he saw the manifestation of what we don't yet understand. And perhaps, he thought, that's what makes the universe so fascinating. It's not the certainty of the answers, but the path to them. One day, while walking through the woods near her home, she thought about the words she had written in her journal weeks earlier. We may never understand the purpose of the Atlas, but if we allow ourselves to be drawn into its mystery, we may discover something greater than any answer. It was a simple reflection, but one that contained a profound truth. Sometimes, the simple act of wondering, of allowing ourselves to be part of the search, was more important than finding the answer itself. The universe, with all its secrets and wonders, remained a vast field of exploration. Adrian was no longer frustrated by not having definitive answers. On the contrary, with each passing day, he felt himself becoming more at peace with the idea that the most important thing was curiosity, the constant desire to learn and discover. And ultimately, the greatest discovery would not be about Atlas or the limits of the cosmos, but about the human capacity to keep going, to wonder, to search, even when answers remain elusive. On those peaceful nights, when he gazed at the stars from his window, Adrian finally understood what Atlas had come to teach him. It wasn't just an object in space, nor a strange astronomical phenomenon. It was an invitation to live with uncertainty, to embrace the unknown, and above all, to never cease to marvel at the vastness of the universe. The stars continued to shine, and with each glimmer, Adrian realized that the journey of knowledge was endless. And on that journey, every question, every doubt, every glance at the sky was as valuable as the answer that would never come. Humanity, perhaps, would never know what Atlas truly was. But Adrian no longer felt that mattered so much. What mattered was the fact that, by looking at the stars, by questioning what we were observing, we had taken another step in our evolution as conscious beings, as beings who never stop seeking, questioning, and wondering. And that, Adrian thought, was the greatest lesson the cosmos had to offer us. So, as Atlas continued its journey through space, a little further from Earth, the legacy of its passage lived on in the minds of all who had dared to look up at the sky and wonder. Perhaps the chaos it wrought in space was nothing more than a sign, a reminder that, even if we think we understand, there is always more beyond what we can see. And perhaps in the end, that is what makes the universe remain so incredibly beautiful, knowing that there will always be more to discover, more to understand, more to question. And in that quest, there will always be something new to challenge us, to look beyond the limits of our knowledge. Time marched on, and with it humanity continued to observe the sky, searching for answers that seemed to recede as more and more questions arose. However, something inside Adrian had changed. The young man who once struggled to understand every corner of the cosmos was now more at peace with the idea that the universe, in all its magnitude, was not meant to be fully understood. The universe was vast, mysterious, and above all, profound. And like him, millions of people around the world were beginning to understand that the true purpose was not to reach all the answers, but to keep asking, to keep searching. Every night, when the city lights dimmed and the sky became a dark canvas dotted with stars, Adrian found himself more connected to the vastness of space. He no longer saw the stars as simple points of light, but as gateways to the unknown. Each glimmer, each constellation, represented not only a part of the universe, but also a part of himself that had yet to be explored. The stars, so far away and distant, seemed to be full of secrets waiting to be discovered. Adrian began to understand that the quest didn't have to be a race toward absolute knowledge. Instead of being focused on finding a definitive answer, he found solace in the beauty of the process itself. And that was what 3i Atlas had taught him. It wasn't just a mysterious object traveling through space. It was a manifestation of everything humanity had yet to learn, but also everything it had already experienced. Every question that arose, every theory that crumbled, only added another layer to humanity's collective understanding. And that quest, Adrian thought, was what made life and the universe so extraordinary. Weeks passed, and humanity continued to watch 3i Atlas, waiting for some new revelation, some clue that would finally unravel its enigma. But at the same time, the object's mystery, its unpredictable trajectory and unique composition, continued to leave a sense of collective wonder. As astronomers tried to understand the nature of 3i Atlas, Adrian found himself increasingly grateful for the personal journey this object had triggered in him. Each night, as he gazed at the stars, he felt more connected to the cosmos, to that immense, incomprehensible greatness that stretched beyond human comprehension. It was as if 3i Atlas had come not only to challenge our ideas about the universe, but to remind us that the magic wasn't in the answers, but in the search itself. Humanity had spent centuries observing the sky, searching for answers to fundamental questions. But now, more than ever, the journey itself had become the purpose. The universe, in its infinity, wasn't rushing to give us all the answers, but rather invited us to keep questioning, to keep searching, to keep exploring. Adrian realized that the chaos brought about by Atlas's arrival in the solar system was merely a reflection of the very nature of the cosmos. Chaos, like the stars that twinkled in the darkness, was only one component of universal balance. In the confusion and uncertainty, the universe continued, and questions remained the spark that ignited human curiosity. As the seasons changed and the world continued to turn, Adrian allowed himself to embrace the beauty of the uncertain. He no longer felt the need to have all the answers. Instead, he accepted that the universe would remain a mystery, an endless series of questions waiting to be asked, and that humanity would never cease to be amazed by what remained to be discovered. The story of 3i Atlas had left an indelible mark on the collective consciousness, but for Adrian, that story was no longer just about an object in space. It was a reminder of the vastness of the cosmos, of how small we are, but also how great the journey of discovery can be. As he gazed up at the sky once more, knowing that 3i Atlas would continue on its course, Adrian realized that the greatest wonder was not understanding the object or its origin, but the human capacity to look beyond the known, to keep asking, to keep seeking. Thus, Atlas became a symbolic figure not only of cosmic chaos, but also of eternal human curiosity, the kind that never ceases to seek what lies beyond the horizon, beyond what can be seen. And as the universe unfolded, Adrian knew that his journey of questioning, of exploration, of searching would never end. The years continued to pass, and although the mystery of Atlas was never fully solved, humanity continued its journey through the cosmos, more aware of the infinite questions that still remained to be answered. Adrian, for his part, never stopped looking at the sky, never stopped wondering. He knew he couldn't wait to find all the answers, but he also understood that this didn't make it any less meaningful. The beauty of life lay in constant exploration, in the eternal search for the unknown. Over time, more and more people began to look at the stars with a renewed perspective. They were no longer just distant bodies, objects of study that represented the end of a question. Stars and planets, comets and asteroids became symbols of what humanity had achieved and what remained to be discovered. And each new discovery, however small, was another piece of the puzzle that united us all, a reminder that we are not alone in this vast universe. As humanity expanded through space, carrying with it the lessons of Atlas III and all the mysteries we had unraveled until then, Adrian began to see the world differently. It was no longer a fixed destination, but an endless journey. And on that path, the most important thing wasn't the goal, but the moments of wonder and reflection that presented themselves at each stage. The most profound thing in life, Adrian thought, is not the moment of arrival, but the ongoing journey of exploration. In those final years, when Adrian was no longer the curious young man searching for definitive answers, he realized that answers, when they came, always brought with them more questions. And in that constant flow of discovery, life became richer, more complex, more beautiful. The entire universe, in its immensity, was a fertile field for human curiosity, a place where the mind and heart could expand without limits. As he gazed at the stars one more night, Adrian thought about the journey he had taken, the impact 3i Atlas had had on him, and how that distant object had changed his way of seeing the world. Perhaps we would never know everything there is in the cosmos. Perhaps some questions would remain unanswered throughout human history. But what 3i Atlas had taught him was that you don't always need a definitive answer to find meaning in things. Sometimes it's the very act of asking, of looking up at the sky and allowing ourselves to be amazed by the unknown, that gives us the peace and meaning we seek. The stars continued to shine, brighter than ever, full of mysteries to be discovered. And as the universe continued its eternal dance, Adrian understood that what truly mattered was to never stop wondering, to never stop dreaming of what lies beyond. Every twinkle in the sky was a reminder that the universe wouldn't stop in the face of our limitations, that it was still infinite, and that every answer found only brought us a little closer to the vast mystery that still unfolds before us. The mystery of Atlas had dissipated, like the wind carries fallen leaves into oblivion, but its lesson had endured. The true wonder of the cosmos lay not in the answers we reach, but in the questions that keep us moving, in the doubts that drive us to look beyond the horizon, to keep exploring, to keep searching. Over time, Adrian came to the conclusion that the universe would never cease to amaze us. And as he continued his journey, now much more peaceful, he no longer felt he needed to understand everything he saw. He just needed to keep looking, keep learning, keep asking questions. In that quest, he found true peace, because he understood that the wonder of the cosmos lies not in the certainty of the answers, but in the constant expansion of the human mind, which will never cease to explore the unknown. And so, with a serene smile on his face, Adrian surrendered himself to the mystery of the universe, knowing that his journey would never end. Because in the end, the universe is not just a place to find answers, but an infinite field where questions will always continue to flourish. And in that endless cycle of questions and answers, humanity would continue to advance, following the traces of the mysteries of the cosmos, with its gaze fixed on the stars, without fear of the unknown, with its heart full of wonder. The years passed, and although Adrian was no longer the young man who stayed up all night searching for answers, his mind remained restless, fueled by memories of Three-Eye Atlas and the lessons he had learned from his strange passage through the solar system. As humanity advanced in its space explorations, the echo of its presence continued to resonate in the research of scientists and astronomers who, like him, sought to understand what still lay beyond the stars. Adrian reached a point in his life where he understood that, like Atlas, our existence in the vast universe is but a breath in cosmic time. However, that didn't make his life any less meaningful. Every day, every reflection, every small discovery was part of something much bigger. The questions would never stop arising, and in that constant uncertainty, he found the beauty of life itself. It was a clear night when, while observing the sky from his terrace, Adrian realized something that had gone unnoticed for so long. The Eye Atlas had been a reminder not only of the vastness of the cosmos, but also of the infinity of time. That object, which upon his first encounter with it had seemed so mysterious and unattainable, now seemed part of a larger cycle. Stars are born and die. Comets pass once in a lifetime and disappear. The question wasn't what would happen to Three-Eye Atlas, but what lessons it left in its wake. Adrian began to think about the fragility of human existence. Often, we cling to the idea that we must understand everything, master everything. But like Atlas, not everything is meant to be understood. Some mysteries are simply meant to be accepted, admired from afar, as we move forward on our own journey. Perhaps, he thought, that was what made us human, our ability to continue to search, even when we don't know what we'll find at the end of the road. The night wore on, and the stars continued to twinkle, unreachable, as if waiting for a new question. Perhaps, he thought, the universe wasn't a puzzle to be solved, but a work of art, always evolving, always full of new shapes and colors. The presence of Three-Eye Atlas in the sky had been just a brushstroke in a much larger picture, one that humans, with their limited perspective, could only intuit. Throughout his life, Adrian had learned to be at peace with what he didn't understand. He no longer felt the need to unravel all the secrets of the cosmos. He knew that, even if humanity managed to advance beyond the stars, there would always be something beyond, something that would defy our understanding. And in that certainty, he found a strange form of peace. It wasn't a peace of resolution, but a peace of acceptance, a peace that came with the realization that mystery was, somehow, the most beautiful thing of all. Over time, Atlas's influence faded from the public sphere. The chaos it had wreaked in space was no longer a topic of conversation, but its lesson lived on in people like Adrian, who understood that mystery is what keeps human curiosity alive. The search wasn't just for answers, but for meaning, and that meaning wasn't always in the final answers, but in the questions, in the act of looking up at the sky with wonder, willing to accept whatever the universe had to offer, even if we didn't fully understand it. And so Adrian lived out the rest of his days, peaceful in his heart, looking up at the sky, and remembering that the greatest lesson Three-Eye Atlas had taught him wasn't about what lay beyond, but about what we were learning here and now. Every night, as he looked up at the stars, he thought that somewhere in the cosmos, something else was waiting to be discovered, and that his story, though perhaps forgotten by most, would remain part of the collective memory. Because Three-Eye Atlas, like every star that shines in the firmament, had left his mark, a distant echo of a universal truth. The search never ends, and in the eternal mystery, there will always be something new to discover. Over the years, as Adrian immersed himself in his studies, and his life continued its course, the sky remained his refuge, his source of reflection. Humanity, like him, had begun to adapt to the idea that definitive answers weren't always possible, and instead of being seen as an obstacle, uncertainty became a driving force for advancement and personal growth. As with Three-Eye Atlas, the questions remained, but the acceptance of not having all the answers was liberating. It was like a silent reminder that what matters most isn't the final destination, but what we discover as we walk toward it. Adrian never stopped stargazing. On the quietest nights, when the noise of the world faded, he would find himself gazing at the sky, seeing the constellations that continue to shine with the same serenity as thousands of years before. Atlas, though no longer making newspaper headlines or dominating scientific conversations, remained in his memory, a symbol of human wonder, of that eternal search for the unknown that would never disappear. And as time passed, its influence on his life was not so much in the search for answers, but in the way it had allowed him to ask deeper, more meaningful questions. In his later years, Adrian began giving talks on astronomy and philosophy, sharing his experience with the younger generation. He always emphasized the importance of not losing curiosity, of continuing to ask questions, even when the answers seemed elusive. The impact of 31 Atlas, although fleeting in terms of public attention, had left a profound mark on him. It taught him not to fear the vastness of the cosmos, nor the immensity of what remained to be discovered, but to embrace that infinite expansion as part of his own evolution. As he taught, he realized that it wasn't just knowledge his students sought, but also a desire to understand the purpose behind everything. In each lesson, he spoke to them about how the true beauty of the universe lay not in fully understanding it, but in the ability to marvel at its immensity. He spoke to them about the importance of embracing uncertainty, of understanding that stars don't need to be understood to be admired, and that the questions they unravel are often more valuable than the answers we find. The passing of time didn't diminish his passion for the sky, but rather granted him a profound peace in knowing that, like the universe, he himself was constantly expanding. The search for answers hadn't stopped, but now Adrian understood that the true lesson of the cosmos was to accept the boundless nature of everything. What's the point of having all the answers if there are no questions to ask? What's the point of reaching an end if the path we've taken allows us to discover so much? Sometimes, when the nights were especially clear, Adrian would sit by his window and gaze up at the vastness of the sky. He thought about Atlas and how that object, with its mysterious trajectory and unwavering passage through the universe, had been a silent teacher, a teacher who had guided him toward a deeper understanding of what it means to be alive in such a vast and mysterious universe. Perhaps the greatest gift Atlas had given him wasn't a cosmic discovery or a solution to a universal enigma. What it had truly taught him, Adrian thought, was the value of the search itself, because in every star, in every unanswered question, in every mystery that unfolds before us, lies the true purpose of our existence. Not to find all the answers, but to learn to keep searching, to keep looking at the sky in wonder, without fear, without needing to understand everything, but with the deep desire to explore everything within our reach. The passing of the years was gentle for Adrian. His life, though marked by moments of uncertainty and doubt, had also been a testament to that fascinating and eternal quest. Like Atlas, who continued his journey through the cosmos without expecting to be understood, Adrian had followed his own journey, finding peace in curiosity, solace in mystery, and joy in unanswered questions. Finally, one night, as the stars shone at their brightest, Adrian felt more connected to the universe than ever before. In that moment, there were no more doubts, no more unanswered questions. There was only acceptance and gratitude. He knew the cosmos would remain a mystery, but he also knew that, like him, it would continue to evolve, grow, and discover. And so, with the sky open before him, Adrian allowed himself to be swept away by the wonder of the unknown. Not because he needed answers, but because the universe itself, in its infinite mystery, had shown him that the true beauty of life lies in the journey, in the desire to explore the unexplored, in the eternity of the questions that keep us dreaming. The story of Atlas III had been etched in his memory, not as a simple astronomical event, but as a reminder that there will always be something beyond, something to compel us to look, to think, to dream. And in that mystery, he found his peace. The years passed with a gentleness that only the passage of time can bestow. Adrian, now an older man, continued to be a beacon of curiosity for those around him, despite life's challenges and the world seeming increasingly complex. His vision of the universe remained unchanged. Mystery was what kept him alive, what drove him to keep searching, to keep learning. And while most human beings remained focused on unraveling the secrets of the cosmos, he had already accepted that the true challenge lies in embracing the beauty of the unattainable. Adrian used to gaze at the stars on the quietest nights and find himself filled with a sense of profound gratitude. The stars, ever constant, ever present, were his witness. What if 3i Atlas had never reached the solar system? What if that fleeting flash that had lit up the sky, though so distant, hadn't marked the course of his life? Perhaps he would have carried on the same way, searching for answers, searching for the knowledge he had always craved. But 3i Atlas had given him something more. It had given him the gift of accepting what cannot be understood, of understanding that the journey itself, with all its uncertainties, is what gives color to existence. Every time he taught about the cosmos, he recalled the lessons learned from that strange visit. Sometimes he spoke to his students about the wonder of not knowing, about the thrill of having unanswered questions. He told them that the universe was not a place to find definitive answers, but a space to marvel at what we don't yet understand. He spoke to them about 31 Atlas, not as a simple astronomical phenomenon, but as a representation of the eternal dance between the known and the unknown. Mystery, he told them, is what keeps us awake, what drives us to keep looking, to keep learning. As the years passed, science reached new heights. Spacecraft traveled farther, telescopes discovered more planets, more stars, more comets. The advances were breathtaking, but Adrian never let the search for answers overshadow the ability to marvel at what still lay beyond reach. For him, advancements were not the end of the journey, but merely another stage. Like Atlas, knowledge continued on its way, unpredictable, wandering, and in a sense, free from human limitations. In the twilight of his life, Adrian realized that he no longer felt the need to solve all the enigmas of the universe. He had achieved a peace that only those who accept the vastness of the unknown can experience. He no longer cared about finding an answer to the greatest question of all: why are we here? What truly mattered was to keep wondering, to keep exploring, no matter the answers. What mattered was the ability to be amazed every time he looked up and saw the starry sky, remembering that, although humanity does not know what lies beyond, curiosity must never die. The universe continued on its course, just like Adrian. Days and nights passed. The stars continued to shine, and he continued to observe. He no longer waited for the cosmos to reveal its secrets to him. Instead, he accepted that the only real secret was the beauty of mystery itself. He didn't need answers to understand that the universe, just as it was enough. One evening, as he sat by his window, staring out at the horizon, Adrian considered that perhaps, in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't about understanding the purpose of the cosmos, but about being part of it. Perhaps, he thought, our mission wasn't to unravel every mystery of the universe, but simply to witness its magnificence, the infinite vastness that surrounds us. At that moment, he knew he had reached an understanding that was sufficient for him. It is not necessary to understand everything around us. We just need to live with the full awareness that the journey toward mystery is, in itself, the most sublime. And so, Adrian continued on his way, now calmer, more serene. There were no definitive answers in his life, but that no longer mattered. What mattered was to continue looking at the sky, to continue feeling that eternal connection with what we still don't understand, and to continue witnessing the magic of the universe. Because the mystery, in its infinite grandeur, was the only thing that truly remained. A mystery that continued to invite us, night after night, to look up, to continue wondering, to continue dreaming. In the end, perhaps what Atlas had come to teach him wasn't a simple discovery, but a much deeper lesson, that life, like the universe, is a constant journey of questions, and that as long as we continue to look toward the stars, there will always be something new to learn, something new to discover. And in that endless search, we find the true meaning of our existence. As the years continued to gently slip by, Adrian realized that the world around him had changed, but he remained steadfast in his understanding that the mystery of the universe was not only something to be solved, but something to be lived and experienced. Generations came and went, and interest in scientific advancements continued to grow. But deep down, Adrian felt that true wisdom lay not in the answers, but in the ability to keep asking, to keep exploring. The stars continued to bear witness to that journey. The passage of time never filled him with fear, but rather with serenity. He had come to understand that the universe, like life itself, was not a place for accumulating certainties, but a space for marveling at the unknown. No matter how many advances were made, how many stars were discovered, or how many planets were mapped, there would always be something beyond, something bigger, more distant, more mysterious. And that was what kept him alive, what drove him to keep looking at the sky, to keep wondering. Over time, conversations about Three-Eye Atlas diminished. The object, though it had once sparked endless theories and speculation, became just a small note in the history books of astronomy. However, for Adrian, its presence in the sky never faded. Every time he looked up at the firmament, he saw more than just stars. He saw a reminder that the universe would always have something more to offer us, something beyond our understanding. And that gave him immense peace. As younger generations grew up and immersed themselves in technological and scientific advances, Adrian saw how humanity moved further away from the wonder of uncertainty, how they rushed to seek answers, to find immediate explanations. But in his heart, Adrian understood that the rush to understand everything only separates us from the true meaning of the cosmos. The answer never lay in immediacy, but in the patience with which we observe, in the time we take to question, to marvel. In his final days, retired from active teaching, but always available to share his love of the universe with those seeking to understand, Adrian felt he had lived a full life. He hadn't had all the answers, nor had he expected them. He had followed the path of knowledge with humility, accepting that what truly matters is not the destination, but how the journey is taken. During his final evenings, he would often sit in his armchair by the window, gazing at the stars once more. The universe, in its infinite magnificence, had guided him here. And deep down in his soul, he felt that although the answers would continue to elude us, the true answer lay in our constant curiosity, in our eternal yearning to know, to understand, to explore. In those moments, his mind returned to Three-Eye Atlas, the errant comet that had crossed the solar system, defying all expectations and leaving unanswered questions. That object, that anomaly in space, had become a symbol of what truly mattered, the ability to move forward, to look into infinity with the same awe-inspiring curiosity that prompted us to look at the sky in the first place. Adrian realized that Atlas's legacy wasn't its origin or its final destination, but the spark of reflection it had ignited in those who had confronted its mystery. Like the comet, we, as human beings, were constantly on the move, searching for answers, but always aware that the universe is larger than what we understand. And that, Adrian thought, is the true meaning of our existence, a never-ending journey, filled with questions that will never cease to guide us. Finally, one peaceful night, as the stars shone with unprecedented clarity, Adrian closed his eyes for the last time. In his heart, he knew that the mystery of the universe would continue. Atlas would continue his path through the stars, and with him, humanity would continue to look up, seeking answers, but above all, embracing the beauty of the question itself. And with that last glance at the cosmos, Adrian said goodbye to the journey, knowing that somewhere in the universe, the mystery of Atlas would live on, an eternal reminder that as long as we keep searching, as long as we keep wondering, the journey never truly ends. In the stillness of the night, as the wind whispered through the trees and the distant city lights flickered softly, Adrian's life came to an end. Without grand ceremonies or dramatic farewells, his soul seemed to have departed as serenely as a comet crossing the firmament, leaving behind only the memory of its passing. At his funeral, friends, family, and colleagues gathered, but no one could help but look to the sky for something more. There was something in Adrian's legacy that transcended his life. His simple yet profound message resonated deeply with those who knew him. Instead of striving for definitive answers, he taught many to embrace the wonder of uncertainty, to ask questions without expecting them all to be answered, to look at the stars not as objects of study, but as symbols of all that the universe still holds in its vastness. Adrian's curiosity was never fully satisfied, and perhaps that was what made him so great. As scientific advances continued, as telescopes extended even beyond the borders of the solar system, the lesson he left behind was simple. Knowledge, no matter how much it expands, will always have boundaries. And the most valuable thing is not reaching an end, but knowing that there will always be more to explore, more to discover, more to dream about. In the years following his passing, Adrian's name became synonymous with that humility in the face of the unknown. His writings, his talks, and above all, his reflections on 3i Atlas and the cosmos became part of the collections of those who, like him, saw the mystery not as something to be solved, but as something we should experience. Astronomers who once discussed the 3i Atlas phenomenon at international conferences began referring to Adrian as a pioneer of philosophical thought in astronomy, someone who taught us to look beyond the stars, not only with a scientific eye, but with a curious heart that never stops searching. But Adrian's legacy didn't end there. In the scientific community and beyond, his philosophy of embracing uncertainty began to take shape. New generations of astronomers, philosophers, and scientists were inspired by his approach, and many began to see the cosmos not just as a field for precise observation, but as a place of infinite wonder, full of possibilities and unanswered questions. Adrian's curiosity had planted a seed that would continue to grow, and in his final reflection, published posthumously, Adrian wrote, "The universe should never be just a place of answers, but an infinite stage for questions. There is no greater beauty than the fact that the more we look, the more we realize how little we know. And that, my friends, is what keeps us alive, what drives us to keep searching. Because as long as there are questions, there will always be a purpose." His words were engraved in the hearts of those who understood that the true journey lies not in reaching the destination, but in the constant expansion of thought and consciousness. In constantly looking upward, toward the unknown, knowing that the search is what truly gives us meaning. And as the universe continued its eternal march, with Atlas now far away on its path, Adrian, in some way, remained a part of it. Like the stars that shine in the distance, his light continued to guide not only those who knew him, but all who ever dared to look up at the sky with a heart full of questions. As time passed, Adrian's influence and his vision of the cosmos expanded even further. His name not only remained in science and philosophy textbooks, but also became part of a broader culture, one that saw space not only as a field for research, but also as a refuge for imagination and reflection. In a world increasingly marked by immediacy, by the accelerated search for answers, Adrian's calm and serene approach to uncertainty became a balm for those who felt the pressure to understand everything immediately. His legacy also reached new generations of students who grew up with the idea that science and philosophy could coexist, that the pursuit of knowledge didn't have to be a race to the finish line, but rather a journey filled with wonder and continual discovery. Universities and observatories began to dedicate scholarships in his name, fostering curiosity and deep reflection in those young people who, like him, saw more in the sky than simple celestial bodies. They saw questions, symbols of a greater understanding, beyond what the human eye can grasp. Meanwhile, humanity continued its exploration of space. Spacecraft traveled deeper and deeper into the cosmos. Probes sent back sharper images of distant planets, and technology continued to advance by leaps and bounds. However, while scientific breakthroughs continued to amaze the world, one thing remained clear to everyone who knew Adrian's story. The universe was not an enigma that could be quickly solved, nor was it a place where all the answers were clear and simple. The cosmos remained vast, mysterious, infinite. And that truth, more than any breakthrough, remained the greatest discovery of all. Over the years, more discoveries were made in the far reaches of the universe, and theories about the existence of life beyond Earth became increasingly contested. Some of Adrian's former colleagues, now aging, took it upon themselves to remember the profound influence of his words. They had learned, perhaps too late, that questions about life, the cosmos, and the future of humanity did not necessarily need to be answered with scientific speed, but rather with a philosophical perspective that respected the mystery and beauty of the cosmos. And as humanity looked to the future, one thing remained constant: the desire to understand, but also the need to accept what we cannot understand. That balance, that space between knowledge and acceptance, was what Adrian cultivated throughout his life and left behind as his most important legacy. In the final years of his legacy, curiosity about the cosmos was no longer the exclusive domain of scientists, but had permeated society as a whole. More people ventured to study astronomy, physics, and philosophy, knowing that the simple act of asking was as valuable as the answer itself. Conversations about space took place not only in observatories or scientific conferences, but also in coffee shops, parks, and homes, where people shared their wonder at the unknown. Adrian had achieved what few achieve in their lifetime. His influence was not limited to his time, but had left a profound mark on the way human beings see their place in the universe. His vision of science not as a simple search for answers, but as an eternal dance between curiosity and acceptance, forever changed the course of those who, like him, felt the need to look up and wonder what else was out there. The day the first signs of life were detected on a distant planet, many who had known and admired Adrian thought of him. Although he never lived to see that historic moment, they knew that, in some way, his legacy had been part of that search. Humanity had taken another step forward in its understanding of the universe, but in everyone's hearts, the idea remained that true progress lay not in finding the answer, but in the continued desire to search for it. And so, Adrian's name lived on, not only in books and scientific records, but in the very heart of humanity, in that eternal curiosity that, like the stars that shine in the distance, will never cease to guide us. Mystery remains our companion, our teacher, and our destiny. As the years slipped into the future, Adrian's legacy extended beyond what he could have imagined in his younger days. His influence transformed into a current that permeated different disciplines, connecting science, philosophy, literature, and poetry, all under a common mantle: mystery. In universities around the world, his writings were cited not only in astronomy or physics classes, but also in philosophy and literature seminars. Social studies teachers began to see the value of integrating philosophical reflection into science teaching. For Adrian had not only been an astronomer, a thinker about the universe. He had been, in many ways, a poet of the cosmos. Like the great philosophers of history, Adrian had shown that the deepest questions did not always require definitive answers. Instead, he had taught that the process of questioning, of being open to wonder and awe, was a form of knowledge in itself. During a conference on the future of space exploration, one of the speakers recalled Adrian's influence. "He always said the universe isn't a puzzle to be solved," he said, "but a canvas of mysteries. And like art, it's not about having all the answers, but about what the search reveals about ourselves." Those words resonated in the ears of everyone present. Science, rather than a race to discover absolute truth, was now seen as a race to discover our own humanity in the vast universe. And although discoveries continued at an accelerated pace, with new planets being discovered, with further advances in telescope technology, and with ever more manned missions into space, Adrian's reflection remained essential, because in many ways, humanity was now faced with a simple yet profoundly complex truth. The more we learn about the universe, the more we realize how infinitely vast what we don't yet know is. In homes, in everyday conversations, the sky remained a place of wonder. People, inspired by Adrian's teachings, began to see the stars not just as distant spheres of gas, but as symbols of endless curiosity, like gateways to an unknown horizon that would never stop expanding. On nights when the city lights went out, people looked to the sky with a new attitude, a mixture of humility and awe, accepting that the answers might never come, but that the beauty of the search itself was what gave their lives meaning. The children, now adults, who had heard Adrian's lessons about the beauty of mystery and the importance of not having all the answers, continued to carry those lessons to new generations. In a way, Adrian's legacy had become embedded in the fabric of society itself. In an era where the speed of technology and the immediacy of information had reached unprecedented levels, Adrian's message was more relevant than ever. The world doesn't always have to be fully understood to be appreciated. Scientists who studied Three-Eye Atlas's behavior, though now focused on other objects in the universe, always remembered the first time the wandering comet crossed the solar system. For many of them, Three-Eye Atlas was not just an astronomical anomaly, but a starting point for deeper reflection on humanity's place in the cosmos. If Three-Eye Atlas taught them anything, it was that the universe, no matter how much they understood it, would always have more to offer. In his final days, when humanity had successfully sent its first human colony to Mars, Adrian was no longer there to see it, but his spirit lived on in every breakthrough. During the inauguration of that first colony, world leaders paused briefly to pay tribute to all those who, like Adrian, had looked to the sky and dared to ask, "What lies beyond?" A small capsule bearing his words was sent into space, floating alongside the ship departing for Mars, as a reminder that the universe remained a place full of mysteries, but also full of possibilities. Adrian's journey, like Atlas's, never ended. His legacy lay not in the answers, but in the endless path of questions he inspired. Because on that journey of constant exploration, humanity would continue, always looking skyward, seeking, questioning, and marveling at the mystery of what we do not yet understand. And in every star, in every distant galaxy, in every wandering comet crossing space, Adrian had left his mark. The lesson that the universe, in all its magnitude, was far greater than anyone could understand. But that true wonder lay in continuing to look toward it, with wonder and with the willingness to never stop dreaming. In the end, Adrian had understood something the universe had taught him throughout his life, that the true purpose of existence lies not in the answers we find, but in the questions that keep us alive. And as long as humanity continued searching, the journey of discovery, like the stars in the sky, would never stop. The passing of time brought with it a profound transformation in the way humanity related to the cosmos. The curiosity Adrian had instilled, both in his own time and in future generations, continued to grow and transform, leaving an indelible mark on human thought. Science, which in its beginnings had been seen as a race to unravel the secrets of the universe, became a dance of discovery and reflection, where answers were not a final goal, but an invitation to continue exploring. The new space explorers, those who embarked on the missions that would take humanity to the farthest reaches of the solar system and beyond, carried Adrian's legacy with them. Each mission, each discovery, was celebrated not only for what it brought, but for the questions it left unanswered. And while scientific advances continued to astonish the world, the spirit of the eternal quest remained intact. As space missions became more common and telescopes reached farther corners of the universe, the concept of exploration took on a more philosophical meaning. Scientists no longer just asked, "What is this?" but also, "Why are we searching? What does it mean that we're looking so far away?" In this sense, Adrian's legacy lived on, reminding everyone that the search was never just about what we found, but about how that search transformed us, inviting us to see the world and the universe differently. Adrian, with his reflections on the mystery and beauty of the unknown, had touched on a profound theme that expanded beyond the confines of science. His idea that the cosmos is not just a puzzle to be solved, but an invitation to wonder, to the constant search for the inexplicable, resonated deeply with the human soul. Even those not dedicated to science, those whose lives were not marked by telescopes or laboratories, began to look at the sky with a new perspective. In our daily routines, the stars were no longer just distant elements in a distant sky, but companions on our journey. They were reminders of the infinity of the universe, and at the same time, of the finiteness of our lives. In the present, new generations of students, now adults, continued the work Adrian had begun, integrating philosophical reflection into every advance. The new astronomers and scientists thought as much about the stars they had discovered as about the questions that remained unanswered. As humanity took its first steps toward the stars, from the confines of Mars to the echoes of signals from distant galaxies, Adrian's thinking continued to guide the course. This was not just a scientific race, but a race toward a deeper understanding of our place in the cosmos, of accepting what we cannot know and continuing to seek what lies beyond. In a final twist of fate, a new space exploration mission, dubbed Adrian 1, was launched in his honor. This mission was dedicated to studying the edges of the solar system, exploring areas never before touched by humans. The craft carried a capsule bearing Adrian's final words, along with his life's mementos and his deepest thoughts on the pursuit of knowledge. The capsule, sent into space, became a symbol of the continuation of his legacy, a reminder that the journey never ends, that exploration never ceases, and that no matter how far we advance, there will always be more to discover. The capsule with his thoughts was sent beyond the limits of the solar system, into the unknown, toward what no human could ever reach. In a way, Adrian, with his life and his legacy, became part of that eternal journey. Although his body was no longer there to see it, his influence would continue to guide future generations of explorers, scientists, and dreamers who would look to the sky, just as he did, with wonder and curiosity. In the hearts of all those who, in some way, had been touched by his legacy, the message lived on. The mystery of the cosmos is not an obstacle, it's an opportunity. We don't have to understand everything to marvel at its greatness. On the contrary, not knowing gives us the freedom to keep searching, to keep dreaming. Thus, humanity continued its journey into the unknown, knowing that each step, however small, brought us closer to a deeper understanding of our place in the universe and kept us connected to that eternal quest that would never cease to guide us. Adrian had learned that the universe wasn't a puzzle to be solved, but a mystery to be experienced. And that lesson, more than any discovery, would endure forever. Over time, the Adrian 1 mission became a milestone in space exploration, not only for its scientific ambition, but for the symbolism it carried. The capsule with Adrian's words, sent into infinity, became an emblem of what he had preached throughout his life, that the search, the process of exploration, was as important as any answer obtained. The messages of hope, persistence in curiosity, and acceptance of the unknown traveled along with the capsule, reaching more people than he could have imagined. Humanity, in some ways, no longer only felt connected to the cosmos through scientific advancements, but also united by that shared quest, that need to explore what lies beyond our reach. Adrian's legacy manifested itself clearly and profoundly in the next generation of scientists and thinkers. The discoveries continued, ever more impressive, but the questions never ceased to arise. Adrian's vision as a curious human being who did not fear the chaos of the universe, but rather accepted it as a fundamental part of existence, permeated the students who, now adults, led spatial and philosophical investigations. Space was no longer seen as a vast emptiness, but as an infinite expanse of opportunities to learn, to question, to wonder. Just as the capsule containing Adrian's words traveled beyond the solar system, the seeds of his thought continued to be planted in the minds and hearts of all who dared to look to the sky with a mixture of wonder and humility. The students, reading Adrian's quotes and sharing his writings, realized that his true legacy lay not in the answers they found, but in creating a culture of continual questioning, of rejoicing in mystery. And in some corner of the universe, where even the most advanced telescopes could not reach, the capsule, with his words, continued its journey. There was something deeply symbolic in that image. A man who dedicated his life to observing the stars, who embraced the immensity of the cosmos without fear, sending his thoughts and his legacy into space. It was the perfect culmination of a life dedicated to seeking the unknown, to understanding that true value lay not in solving every mystery, but in how we approach it. The capsule's journey symbolized something larger. Although science and technology continued to advance, that capsule not only represented another step forward in the exploration of the universe, but also became a testament to the importance of reflection and philosophy in the process of discovery. It was a reminder that knowledge is not just something you accumulate, but something you live, feel, and embrace in your soul. Because, as Adrian had taught, everything we knew in the universe also told us something about who we were as human beings, our capacity to seek, to wonder, to wonder. As the centuries passed, humanity continued to expand beyond its home on Earth. The first colonies established on other planets were only the beginning of a continuing process of exploration and settlement in the cosmos. However, although science and technology achieved advances that Adrian never dreamed of, his message remained the foundation of that journey. The need to look at the universe not only with the eyes of reason, but with the eyes of wonder, never faded. A curious and open gaze toward mystery continued to guide those who ventured beyond the borders of the planet. In the years following the final mission, future generations continued to look to the sky and wonder, just as Adrian had, what lay beyond. And as the ships continued to explore the farthest reaches of the universe, and the stars continued to shine just as brightly, Adrian's message remained unchanged. The true magic of the universe lies not in the certainty of what we find, but in the journey of discovery, in the eternal dance between questions and answers, and in accepting that not everything has to be understood to be appreciated. In the end, when human beings looked to the future, they no longer did so simply with the hope of finding something new, but with the awareness that every step into the unknown was a lesson in what it means to be human. As Adrian had experienced and taught, the cosmos is not just a stage for cosmic events, but a mirror of our own nature, an invitation to keep searching, to keep learning, and to keep questioning our surroundings. Thus, in every star that twinkled in the darkness, in every distant galaxy, and in every wandering comet that crossed space, there was an echo of Adrian's legacy, the eternal journey of human curiosity, which would never cease to explore, to wonder, and to forge ahead. As humanity continued to advance, adapt, and grow in its exploration of the cosmos, Adrian's legacy remained rooted at the heart of every new mission, every discovery, and every new question that arose. The first generations who grew up with his ideas were now leaders in fields such as astrobiology, quantum physics, and cosmic philosophy, and they realized that their work was both scientific and existential. It was not just about unraveling the secrets of the universe, but about understanding what it meant to be part of something so vast and mysterious. In the decades that followed, space exploration reached new frontiers. Humanity had established permanent settlements on Mars, and had begun colonizing some of the nearest exoplanets. With the advent of new technologies, intergalactic missions began to take shape, and space stations orbited in previously unthinkable places. However, even as humanity expanded across the universe, something continued to resonate in the minds of those committed to exploration. The question of what it meant to be an explorer, not only of outer space, but also of inner space. As ships traveled farther and reached the edges of the solar system, humanity was forced to reflect on its place in the cosmos. What did expanding beyond Earth really entail? Why were we doing it? While some people saw space colonization as a necessity, others remembered Adrian's words. It's not just the fact that we reach a new world that matters, it's what we learn about ourselves in doing so. The goal wasn't simply to plant flags or collect resources, but to learn more about humanity itself by facing the immense emptiness of space. Adrian's legacy continued to inspire. Discoveries were seen not only as scientific victories, but as opportunities for personal and collective growth. New generations were no longer content with simply searching the stars for answers. They asked themselves, what do the stars reveal about us? What can we learn from the vastness of the cosmos and from our small part in it? The capsule containing Adrian's words, which had been sent beyond the limits of the solar system, continued its journey through space, and the scientists monitoring its course never ceased to remember the ideas it contained. In its final transmission, the capsule had reached a distant sector of the universe, an area so remote that it could barely be detected by the most advanced telescopes. But even in the infinite distance, its message remained intact. Human curiosity should never be afraid of mystery, because in the end, mystery is what makes us human. His legacy became a guiding principle for human exploration, a constant reminder that the cosmos is much more than a stage for interplanetary adventures. It is a mirror, a space for reflection on who we are, what we have learned, and what we have yet to discover. Humanity continued to grow, and space exploration became a shared journey, not only between scientists and astronauts, but between all people in the world. As technology improved, the boundaries between the known and the unknown became increasingly blurred. But despite the advances, one thing remained clear. There would never be a definitive answer about the cosmos. Space, like life itself, is an enigma, an infinite vastness that we can only try to understand, but that we will never stop exploring. Adrian, though absent, never ceased to be part of that exploration. His ideas about uncertainty, the acceptance of cosmic chaos, and the fascination with the unknown endured through every mission, every observation, and every question asked. Through his writings, his reflections, and his influence, humanity understood that the true essence of exploration was not reaching a fixed destination, but rather experiencing the constant expansion of consciousness, curiosity, and connection with everything around us. Future generations, as they gazed at the stars and embarked on their own journeys into the unknown, continued to seek answers, yes, but they also understood that, ultimately, the journey was what shaped them. Each step beyond the limits of Earth represented not only a scientific achievement, but a moment of collective introspection, an opportunity to ask more questions, to doubt, to marvel at the mystery that remains the fundamental characteristic of our existence. Thus, as spaceships crossed the vast distances of the universe and humans settled on distant worlds, One eternal truth remained clear. The universe remains as unfathomable as it was in the beginning. And although discoveries would continue to arrive, humanity would never cease to marvel at the unknown, to tirelessly ask questions, and to learn to live with the certainty that, like Atlas, we will never be entirely sure where our journey will take us. But that is what makes it so fascinating. And so, the legacy of Adrian, of Atlas, and of all those who have looked to the sky in search of something more, lives on in the infinite journey of humanity, a journey that will never end, a journey filled with mystery, questions, and above all, wonder. Humanity's journey into the unknown continued unabated. Technological advances, interplanetary missions, and explorations that took humanity beyond the limits of the solar system marked a new era. But with each step toward the stars, something fundamental remained present. The spirit of inquiry that Adrian had instilled remained intact in the hearts of all who embarked on the journey. Scientists, philosophers, engineers, and dreamers continued to be driven by the same restlessness that had characterized Adrian, the fascination with what lies beyond our reach, the insatiable desire to discover what we don't yet know. Advances in artificial intelligence, the exploration of planets outside the solar system, and efforts to unravel the secrets of the unknown dimensions of space reflected that drive, that thirst for knowledge that isn't quenched by simple answers, but is fueled by constant questioning. Amid these advances, humanity began to experience a transformation. Space was no longer seen as an obstacle to be overcome, but as a fertile field for profound reflection. The old boundaries of science and philosophy dissolved into an open dialogue, where questions about the meaning of human existence, our place in the cosmos, and the future of humanity intertwined. The same fascination with the unknown that had guided Adrian remained the beacon illuminating the path to a future where answers were less important than the ability to ask questions. On one of humanity's most ambitious missions, the Star Voyager, an intergalactic exploration vessel, was sent to study the deepest mysteries of space-time, crossing the boundaries of the most distant galaxies. The mission, inspired by Adrian's writings, set out to explore not only the physical laws that govern the universe, but also the philosophical questions that this same universe raises. The team of scientists and thinkers aboard the ship shared a common vision. The cosmos was not a place to be conquered, but to be understood, appreciated, and above all, respected in its immensity. The Star Voyager ship would not only carry the most advanced exploration equipment, but also a capsule containing the thoughts and principles Adrian had formulated throughout his life. That capsule would not only be an integral part of the mission, but also a constant reminder of the importance of not rushing into definitive answers. In one corner of the ship, the capsule rested next to a hologram of Adrian, his face serene, gazing out over the horizon of the cosmos, a symbol that travel is never about reaching a destination, but about the ongoing process of exploration. In every corner of the ship, the mission members studied Adrian's questions, pondering them as they moved into uncharted territory. "The universe is not just a puzzle to be solved," read one of the phrases playing on their screens. "It is a place full of mysteries, and our task is not to unravel them all, but to learn to live with them." The phrase became the mission's motto. Although the discoveries made by previous ships had been extraordinary, This voyage sought a purpose beyond scientific wonders. It was an existential experience, a profound reflection on our relationship with the unknown. As the ship crossed the vast distances of interstellar space, humanity continued to look to the sky, no longer just with the hope of finding life on other planets, but also with the understanding that every discovery opens up new questions. And in those questions, they found meaning. Because, as Adrian had taught, the cosmos doesn't need to be fully understood to be appreciated. As the Star Voyager's journey continued, humanity began to understand what Adrian had always known, that the greatest gift of the universe is not knowledge itself, but the ability to keep seeking, to keep exploring, to keep dreaming. Human thought, fueled by centuries of questioning, now extended across the universe. But this wasn't just a physical advance. It was a philosophical advance, an expansion of collective consciousness. Each step taken toward the stars was a reflection of what had already been achieved, not just the ability to reach new places, but also the ability to find purpose in that journey, to accept what is unknown, and embrace what remains to be discovered. In this new awakening of humanity, Adrian's figure lived on. It wasn't just his name, but his vision of what it meant to be part of an infinite cosmos. The Star Voyager ship, crossing the void of space, bore witness to that philosophy in action. Adrian, in his infinite curiosity, in his capacity to accept the unknown, continued to guide humanity on its greatest journey, one that traversed not only space, but also the very soul of those who dare to look up and wonder what lies beyond. And on that journey, no matter how much more they discovered, humanity would never lose what Adrian had taught them, that the true purpose of our existence lies not in the final goal, but in the eternal journey of the search, in the perpetual wonder of the unknown, and in the courage to keep going, always looking toward the stars. As humanity's journey continued, it was no longer just an advancement in space technology, but also an expansion of collective consciousness. Intergalactic missions multiplied, and human colonies were established beyond Earth's orbit. But despite the achievements, the fundamental principle of Adrian's legacy remained the basis of all exploration. Knowledge, though essential, should never blind us to the wonder of the unknown. As generations lived and died in the colonies, the sense that the universe was an endless mystery remained intact. The cities built on Mars and beyond bore witness to human expansion, but also to a shift in how inhabitants viewed their place in the cosmos. It was no longer just about conquering, dominating, or harnessing the resources of space, but about understanding that every step beyond Earth brought with it a new question, a new concern about what it meant to be human in this vast and incomprehensible universe. In one corner of those colonies, students from all over the world gathered to learn not only about astronomy, but also about the philosophy of the cosmos. In every class, Adrian's words were remembered and quoted, inspiring a new generation of explorers to look beyond telescopes and galactic maps and reflect on the purpose of their existence. It's not just the object we find, but what it reveals about our humanity, the professors repeated, conveying to their students the importance of accepting mystery with humility. Future generations, born in distant colonies, gazed at the stars with the same wonder Adrian had felt, even though the circumstances were different. Yet the eternal question remained in their hearts. What does it mean to be here in this vast universe? And although technology had reached limits never before imagined, humanity was still driven by the same primal force, the desire to understand the inexplicable. Humanity had learned to navigate the stars, but it was still navigating its own soul in search of meaning. On Earth, Adrian's memory was more vivid than ever. His work had been translated into multiple languages, and his reflections, more than just an intellectual legacy, had become an intrinsic part of human culture. Books, documentaries, art, music, all carried the echo of his ideas. People, more than ever, understood that knowledge is not just a path to answers, but an endless exploration that engages both the heart and the mind. And as ships reached the most remote regions of the known universe, discoveries continued to arrive. The most distant planets were mapped, mysterious signals from other civilizations were collected, and knowledge of the cosmos grew. Yet, no matter how many advances followed, Hadrian's lesson never faded. What Hadrian had learned, and what his followers continue to understand, was that not everything in the universe had to be understood or solved to be valuable. True value, they believed, lay in the eternal desire to keep looking up, to keep asking questions. When humanity finally reached the farthest reaches of the Milky Way and made contact with other life forms, many encountered something they could not have predicted. These were not just intelligent beings, but a complexity so vast and profound that for the first time, humanity realized the unknown lay not only in the stars, but within themselves. Interaction with alien civilizations brought with it a host of new philosophical, spiritual, and existential questions. The curiosity to know and explore never ended, but what truly changed was the recognition that the universe was larger and more mysterious than anyone had imagined. Adrian, though no longer there to see it, became a kind of silent guide for all of humanity. The discoveries, new theories, and adventures in space always carried his legacy with them. "Mystery is our home, not a challenge to be overcome," he had once said. And humanity, now scattered across several star systems, fully understood this. Each time a new generation launched into space, they no longer did so with the hope of finding final answers, but with the profound understanding that each discovery was just another step on a ladder that would never reach its end. It was an eternal journey, with no beginning or end, full of wonder and questions, but without a definitive goal, because the true purpose lay in the process of exploring, questioning, and wondering. Thus, Hadrian's legacy continued to be a beacon of light, not only for science, but also for humanity as a whole. The most distant star, the most remote planet, were nothing more than symbols of what we had always been, beings in constant search. And on that path, Hadrian had shown us that the cosmos, with all its chaos and beauty, is an invitation to live with uncertainty, to accept the unknown, and to continue, always continue, looking toward the stars. Humanity's journey, which began millennia ago with simple questions about the sky, now unfolded into an endless quest. And with every step they took, with every new planet they discovered, with every mysterious signal they picked up, they felt Hadrian's presence accompanying them, not as a figure from the past, but as a living force that continued to drive the desire to look beyond, to keep asking questions, and to never stop dreaming. As future generations explored new star systems, Hadrian's ancient lessons continued to resonate in their hearts and minds. Throughout time, space missions that crossed the boundaries of the solar system and ventured to the farthest reaches of the galaxy were no longer motivated simply by science, but by a profound sense of wonder and reflection. The questions Adrian had posed remained relevant. What does it mean to be human in such a vast universe? How does our relationship with the unknown define us? What is our place in the cosmos? Colonies on exoplanets became centers of philosophical and scientific reflection. As cities on Mars, Europa, and other worlds flourished, people looked to the heavens with a mixture of humility and hope. There was a common understanding that, however much advanced knowledge might resolve some of the mysteries of the universe, there would always remain an open space for the unanswered question, the unsolved mystery. At one of the leading New Age universities, Adrian's legacy lived on. Classes were taught not only on astronomy and physics, but also on cosmic philosophy, a discipline born thanks to his influence. Students discussed how each new discovery about the universe should be accompanied by deep reflection on what it meant to be part of such a vast and incomprehensible whole. One day, at a conference on humanity's expansion into the universe, a young astronomer stood up to share an idea that resonated strongly in the room. The greatest mystery is not in what we discover, but in how it changes our view of ourselves. Every new frontier we cross brings us closer to understanding what we don't know, what we can never understand, and it is in that tension, in that contradiction, where the true beauty of the cosmos lies. Those words were the seed of a new philosophical movement that soon spread throughout the colonies and space stations. Humans, now dispersed across various star systems, began to understand that their expansion throughout the universe was not only a matter of material progress, but also a process of intellectual and spiritual evolution. Instead of seeing space exploration as an end in itself, it began to be seen as a form of growth, of self-knowledge. Space, they believed, was not only a place to conquer, but a mirror to better understand their own humanity. Throughout this process, the inhabitants of the space colonies began to value their connection to the universe more, without needing to have all the answers. Acceptance of the immensity of the unknown became a central principle. It was no longer so important to discover what lay beyond, but rather to learn to live with the wonder of what we don't understand. Adrian's importance lay precisely in that, in teaching us to see the beauty in the search, in the mysteries that still remain hidden, and in accepting that the process of questioning is what truly defines us as human beings. In one of the last exploration missions sent by the new colonies, the ship Infinite, who had set out to explore the edges of the galaxy, sent a message to Earth and all the colonies. We have reached the end of our journey, beyond the known, and what we find are not answers, but more questions. And that, my friends, is all we need. We must not fear the unknown, but embrace it. The message, broadcast across interplanetary systems, touched the heart of every human being in the colonies. It was a reminder that the human mission was not about reaching a final destination, but about continued exploration, about constant wonder at what we still have to learn. On Earth, as generations watched humanity expand toward the stars, Adrian's words remained a beacon of light. In every conversation about the cosmos, his name was mentioned with reverence. The questions he raised about what it meant to be in such a vast and ever-expanding universe remained the driving force of human curiosity. New Age philosophers and scientists began to combine scientific knowledge with the philosophical questions Adrian had raised. They no longer asked simply, "How does the universe work?" but also, "What does the universe tell us about our own nature?" This interplay between knowing and not knowing, between science and philosophy, became the basis for a new vision of the future. The stars Adrian had observed his entire life, which once prompted him to ask questions beyond science, were now seen by future generations not just as distant objects, but as symbols of the quest itself. Each star in the sky was a reminder that as long as there is something to discover, there will always be something worth exploring, something that connects us to the vastness of the cosmos, and in turn, to our humanity. As humanity continued its journey toward the stars, it continued to learn what Adrian had already understood: that the universe is an infinite mystery, but that it is in this constant search that we find our true essence. Humanity's expansion into space was not only a material victory, but a victory of human thought. A thought that would never cease to question, to seek, and above all, to marvel at the immensity of the cosmos. In that sense, the mission to explore was not only external, but also internal, an endless journey that would never end. And as the universe continued to unfold before them, humans would continue searching, always looking toward the stars, embracing the beauty of mystery, and learning to live with the eternal fascination of the unknown. Future generations, as they expanded beyond the known limits, understood that the cosmos was not only a physical challenge, but also a profound invitation to existential reflection. As they ventured through new galaxies and planets, many of them felt the same serenity that Adrian had experienced when he gazed at the stars for the first time. The journey into the unknown, though fraught with uncertainty, was also a journey to the heart of humanity itself. The quest, in its purest essence, was not merely a race for survival or the mastery of new worlds, but a means to understand our relationship with the universe. In each new colony, with each new discovery, the echoes of Adrian's lessons remained present. Scientists were no longer just searching for answers, but also reflecting on the philosophical implications of what they found. What does it mean for humanity to discover life on other planets? How does discovering other worlds, other forms of existence, transform us, if we are aware of how little we still know about our own being? These questions began to occupy a central place in the discussions of those who, like Adrian, had understood that the true value of exploration lay not in reaching a specific destination, but in what we learn as we travel. Advances in artificial intelligence and quantum technology brought new dimensions to exploration. Humans no longer relied solely on spacecraft and telescopes to explore the farthest reaches of the universe, but AI, with its ability to process and analyze data at unprecedented speed, began to help them understand phenomena that previously seemed completely unattainable. However, even with these advances, constant reflection on the meaning of our existence remained crucial. As Adrian had taught, technology is a tool, but it is our ability to ask questions and challenge what we encounter that truly defines us. As humanity extended its presence throughout the cosmos, new institutions were founded that combined science with philosophy. Interstellar observatories, academies of cosmic knowledge, and centers of philosophical reflection were built both on Earth and in the colonies. These spaces were not only for scientific advancement, but also for contemplation and discussion about the meaning of what was being discovered. Adrian's thoughts continued to be the cornerstone of these institutions. His vision of the constant search as a journey in itself, a journey that, while perhaps never leading to a final answer, will always bring with it new ways of understanding our own nature. In a particularly significant moment, the Space Exploration Council held an event honoring Adrian. Throughout the event, videos of his lectures were shown, excerpts from his writings were read, and his ideas on the nature of human curiosity and its relationship with the cosmos were discussed. For many, it was a powerful reminder that, even as science advanced, they could not forget the importance of the philosophical questions that had guided early space explorers. "What defines us as humanity," read one of his quotes on the screen, "is not what we know, but what we are willing to learn, even when the answers don't come." At that event, the president of the Interplanetary Federation, at the end of his speech, concluded with a reflection that resonated deeply with everyone present. "We've come so far, we've touched the stars, but humanity's true advancement lies not in the planets we've conquered, but in our ability to keep searching, to keep questioning. No matter how many worlds we discover, or how many galaxies we explore, the journey will always be the same, learning to live with the mystery, and in that we are guided by Adrian's legacy." As the new generations continued their journey into the unknown, they no longer felt like conquerors of empty space, but rather like humble explorers of a cosmos that would always overwhelm them. They knew that although knowledge would never reach its end, the constant search would continue to be what gave them purpose. And with every step they took, with every mission they undertook, Adrian was still there, in their thoughts, in their philosophical approach, reminding them that the most important journey was the one that never ended. As generations passed, Adrian's name, though perhaps no longer concretely remembered, continued to be a guiding light in every corner of the known universe. Through his teachings, new generations not only understood science, but also understood that humanity's purpose was not simply to know, but to find meaning in the constant questioning. The cosmos continued its infinite dance, and with each turn, humanity continued to look to the sky with the same curious eyes that Adrian had had, without fear, without rushing, only with the serenity of knowing that, even if we would never understand everything, the journey toward mystery would always be the most beautiful. And in some distant corner of the universe, Adrian's capsule continued its journey, carrying his legacy with it, like an eternal testament to humanity, who would never stop looking toward the stars, always ready to wonder, what else is out there? The decades continued to pass, and humanity, now settled on multiple planets and moons, continued to witness an evolution not only scientific, but also philosophical and cultural. Expansion throughout the cosmos was not simply an effort to inhabit new worlds, but a continual exploration of the human soul, a quest that, as Adrian had taught, didn't always find definitive answers, but was filled with meaning at every step. The search for the unknown became a force that unified all humans scattered throughout the universe. The idea of an infinite cosmos, full of mysteries and unanswered questions, had become deeply embedded in the collective consciousness. Space cities, once symbols of technological advancement, were now seen as centers of reflection, places where humanity celebrated not only its achievements, but also its doubts, uncertainty, and wonder. Colonists on Mars, Europa, and other worlds not only built habitats, but formed philosophical communities that explored the meaning of their existence. Space exploration was ultimately a way to explore the meaning of life itself. Meanwhile, intergalactic missions continued. The star Voyager, launched to reach the most distant frontiers of the galaxy, was now traveling through regions of space where no human vessel had ever been sent before. But despite the achievements in technology and quantum physics, the mission carried with it a burden more philosophical than scientific. The capsule, with Adrian's words, "The ship and its crew were not only seeking information, but also an understanding of what it meant to be human in such a vast cosmos." The question that defines us is not what lies beyond, but what does it all mean to us, were the words the crew carried with them as a guiding principle. No matter how far they advanced, there was always something beyond, something that challenged the boundaries of what they could understand. At the same time, humanity had begun communicating with beings from other civilizations. In the first contacts with intelligent species, Adrian's principles resonated again. New life forms brought not simple answers, but more questions. Are we the only beings who ask questions? What does it mean to be conscious in such a vast universe? How do we define our existence when we encounter other beings who have a completely different vision of the cosmos? In those encounters, humanity witnessed something Adrian had anticipated. We are not only here to solve the mystery of the cosmos, but to learn how to live with it, how to accept it, how to understand that the questions that arise from looking at it are as valuable as any answer. In a space of intergalactic communication, Adrian's thought became a philosophical bridge connecting all species who, in some way, felt equal before the mystery of the universe. Although the universe remained infinitely vast and full of enigmas, humanity, like Adrian, understood that the true meaning of exploration was not the conquest of space, but the constant inner transformation it brought with it. Technology could take us to new planets, but only thought and reflection could guide us in our relationship with the cosmos. And that was true expansion, not only beyond the stars, but within ourselves. Subsequent generations, who grew up on distant worlds, learned from a young age to contemplate the sky, not only as an object of study, but as a call to reflection. Each planet discovered, each new star observed, brought with it a reflection on what it meant to be there, in that vast sea of galaxies. Adrian's lessons had left an indelible mark on the way humanity viewed its place in the universe. The stars were no longer merely objects of desire or conquest, but symbols of eternal mystery, invitations to look up and ask once again, what lies beyond? And as human ships continued to cross space, as new colonies expanded across the cosmos, Adrian remained an eternal figure, not only in the historical record, but in the collective mind of humanity. In every discovery, every breakthrough, every reflection, his influence lived on, not as a man or a thinker of the past, but as a spark of curiosity that would never cease to burn in human hearts. Because in the end, Adrian's legacy wasn't in what he left behind, nor in what he managed to discover. His true legacy lay in the question itself, in endless curiosity, in the willingness to embrace mystery without fear, and at the same time to never stop searching. And that search, which began with a simple glance at the sky, continued to be the essence of humanity, an endless journey toward the unknown, toward what will always be beyond our reach, but always worth exploring. And so, with every step we take, we continue to gaze at the stars, remembering that the mystery of the cosmos will never be solved, but that, in that constant search, we find our true greatness. Over the centuries, humanity's expansion through space became more than just an effort to survive or thrive on new worlds. The colonization of planets and the building of new civilizations on distant moons brought with it a profound understanding of what it means to exist in such a vast and mysterious universe. And as humanity grew, Hadrian's lesson remained more relevant than ever. The true purpose of exploration is not to discover, but to understand what it means to be on a journey itself. Each new colony, each new space station, each new scientific frontier became a place of reflection. Scientists, philosophers, and dreamers shared the same questions Adrian had asked in his life. What does it mean to be here? Why are we looking at the stars? How can we understand our place in a universe so vast and full of mysteries? These questions, posed by one man centuries ago, remained the driving force that drove humanity forward. Humanity, though now more advanced than ever, realized that true knowledge lies not in the accumulation of facts or discoveries, but in the way those discoveries transform us, challenge us, and lead us to a deeper understanding of our own existence. The questions Adrian posed were not only still relevant, but had also evolved, no longer just about the universe, but about humanity itself. What do we learn from the worlds we inhabit? What does each planet, each star, each comet teach us about ourselves? On the most distant planets where life had begun to flourish in human communities their ancestors had never imagined, Adrian's thoughts lived on in the hearts of all. The intergalactic leaders who ruled over vast territories of space taught not only about the physical laws that governed planetary systems, but also about the importance of questioning the very nature of existence, about the need to continue exploring not only space, but also the human soul. Adrian's teachings had become embedded in human culture, and it was no longer just about science or exploration, but about living with the humility of knowing that we will never understand everything, but that this process of seeking is what truly gives us meaning. And as the ships traveled toward the most distant stars, Adrian's thoughts continued to guide those who ventured into the unknown. On every exploration, on every mission, they asked themselves not only what they had discovered, but what that discovery taught them about themselves, about their fears, their desires, and their relationship with the infinite. In Adrian's lessons, humanity understood that the universe was not there merely to be conquered or understood, but to be experienced, to be lived with a heart full of questions. A significant event occurred when humanity achieved what had been a long-awaited dream for centuries: first contact with an advanced alien civilization. This long-awaited discovery brought with it a torrent of emotions: awe, disbelief, but also deep reflection on the significance of this discovery. At first, Humanity's impulse was to try to understand this new species, establish bridges of communication, and learn from them. But what surprised the early explorers was not the information they received, but the idea that these beings, like humans, were also questioning their existence in the cosmos. This led to a deeper, more philosophical understanding. Perhaps, they thought, the purpose of contact wasn't just the exchange of knowledge, but the confirmation that in the grand scheme of the universe, curiosity is what unites us. And so, the first intergalactic contacts brought about a revolution in the way humanity saw itself. We weren't the only thinking beings in the universe, but our curiosity, our constant search for meaning, made us special. In the colonies, new generations of humans grew up in this new light. Science, art, philosophy, and religion intertwined into a new world view, one that didn't seek to explain everything, but rather to live with the awareness of what we still had to learn. Young people looked to the sky, not only as a place of opportunity, but as a place filled with mysteries, questions, and most importantly, a purpose greater than themselves. Throughout the generations, Adrian's thought became part of human identity, and his legacy was preserved not only in science, but in culture itself. It was celebrated in universities, discussed in interplanetary assemblies, and reflected upon on quiet space nights, where the colonies would gaze at the stars, as Adrian did, with the same mixture of humility and wonder. The journey into the unknown, a journey without end, not only stretched to the farthest reaches of the universe, but became an inner journey for every human being who dared to look beyond their planetary home. Adrian, who had begun his own journey by looking to the sky with simple, profound questions, continued to guide humanity, not with definitive answers, but with the power of the question itself. Adrian's legacy never stopped growing. As generations continued to explore, they understood that the true purpose of travel was not to find final answers, but to embrace mystery, to accept the infinity of the cosmos, and most of all, to live in constant awe of the wonder of what we do not yet understand. And as the universe continued to expand, humanity would never stop searching, because, as Adrian had shown, the search itself is what makes us human. Over the centuries, the echo of Adrian's teachings resonated not only in the space colonies, but throughout the entire philosophical and scientific structure of humanity. As succeeding generations expanded to the farthest reaches of the cosmos, his reflections remained a fundamental part of human thought. Adrian, a man who had begun his life with the simple curiosity of looking at the sky, had left a legacy that transcended science. A call to reflection, humility in the face of the unknown, and acceptance of the infinity of the universe. In the space colonies, Hadrian's ancient texts were studied as classics, and his philosophy was not only read, but lived. Younger generations, though growing up surrounded by astonishing technological advances and unprecedented scientific discoveries, never forgot the lesson that true progress lay not in the answers, but in the questions. Humans, as they explored new planets, as they studied the mysteries of space, never ceased to question their purpose, their place, and their relationship to the universe. On the last great intergalactic mission, undertaken to explore the frontiers of the known universe, the capsule containing Adrian's words was carried as a symbol not only of the physical journey into the unknown, but also of the philosophical journey humanity was still undertaking. As they crossed the threshold of the farthest known galaxy, The mission leaders gathered around the capsule, recalling Adrian's words. Mystery is our home, not a challenge to be overcome. We live with it, we accept it, and in that act, we grow. The capsule was sent farther, heading into the depths of space, on a journey that had no other purpose than to carry with it the memory of a man who had understood something fundamental. The universe is immense, unreachable, and above all, full of mysteries. And it was this very vastness that gave meaning to human life. In that symbolic act, humanity understood that the journey of exploration was not only toward the stars, but also toward the deepest part of our existence, toward that spark of curiosity that Adrian had ignited in all of us. As the years turned into centuries, and humanity settled on more and more worlds, Adrian's idea of the philosophical exploration of space became integrated into the new interplanetary cultures. Science, although more advanced than ever, began to integrate philosophy into its core, no longer as a separate field, but as an essential part of research. Astronomers, physicists, and space explorers now thought not only about the data they collected, but also about the deeper meaning behind their discoveries. Every planet discovered, every star observed, every black hole studied, became an opportunity to reflect on what it all meant for humanity. Adrian, despite having passed away so long ago, never ceased to influence human thought. In every ship that sailed through space, in every telescope that pointed to the sky, in every question that arose, his legacy lived on. The search for answers, the acceptance of the unknown, the ability to marvel at the incomprehensible. These were lessons that continued to be passed down, generation after generation. The final words left behind by the explorers of the Star Voyager, a ship that had traveled beyond the Milky Way, were a testament to what Adrian had realized in his life. What we have found is not an answer, but a new question. And that, more than anything, is what defines us as human beings. We never stop exploring. We never stop asking. These words were sent across the remotest distances of space and reached the farthest corners of humanity, inspiring every new explorer, every child who dreamed of the stars, to keep searching. Humanity never stopped looking to the sky. With each generation, with each advancement, the universe seemed to open up a little more. And even though they couldn't understand everything, the search didn't stop. On the contrary, it became the very purpose of human existence. Infinite curiosity, the desire to understand what we don't know, became the driving force that continued to propel humanity toward the stars. And on that journey, Adrian, the man who had begun by looking at the sky with a simple question, continued to guide us all, like a beacon of light, reminding us that mystery, although never fully solved, is what keeps us alive. And so, in the vastness of the cosmos, humanity, as one, continued to gaze toward the stars, always wondering, always exploring, always seeking what lies beyond. And the journey, which began with a simple glance at the sky, continued endlessly into infinity. Over the centuries, humanity, now spread across vast swathes of the universe, had not only conquered new planets, but had achieved what it had never imagined, a new way of being. The exploration of space, which began as a simple curiosity about the unknown, had become a deeper quest, an existential adventure. It was no longer just about moving forward, but about understanding how this expansion transformed us, how it changed the way we saw ourselves and our surroundings. Each new human colony, on its distant worlds, began to question the same basic question. What does it mean to live in the universe? Each newly inhabited planet, each space station constructed, became a place of reflection, not only scientific, but philosophical. Space, once seen as an empty place to be filled, had been transformed into a mirror reflecting our own humanity, our emotions, our fears, and our uncanny capacity to wonder about what we don't understand. Technological and scientific advances continued unabated. New spacecraft crossed the borders of unknown galaxies, and artificial intelligence advanced exponentially, helping to process the vast amounts of information arriving from the far reaches of the universe. But even with all this progress, what truly defined humanity was not the material conquest of space, but the expansion of collective consciousness. The questions posed by Adrian continue to guide every new explorer, scientist, or thinker. What are we in such a vast universe? What is our purpose here? How can we understand space and our place in it? Were now universal questions, shared by all human beings scattered across the planets. In the farthest reaches of space, the capsule with Adrian's words continued its journey. In the not-too-distant future, the capsule reached such a remote distance that its signal was almost imperceptible. However, new intergalactic monitoring systems picked up its transmission, and what was heard was a message that resonated deeply in the hearts of those who listened. The universe isn't just a place to explore, it's a reflection of ourselves. In its vastness, we find our doubts, our fears, but also our potential to keep searching, to keep learning. No matter how far we go, there will always be something more to discover. And in that search, we find our true humanity. This message, transmitted across vast distances, became a symbol of humanity's continuing purpose. It was not just about understanding what lay beyond, but what that beyond told us about ourselves. Meanwhile, younger generations, who had grown up in distant space colonies, began to reflect deeply on the relationship between humanity and the universe. For them, space exploration wasn't just an effort to advance, but a way to heal, to better understand who they were and what it meant to be human in this vast and complex cosmos. In some ways, Adrian's philosophy had evolved. It was no longer just about accepting mystery, but about finding a way to live in harmony with it, accepting that we would never have all the answers, but that didn't stop us from continuing to search, to continue to ask. Humanity no longer lived only on Earth. It had colonized Mars, Europa, and beyond, but the stars remained its greatest source of wonder and reflection. Spacecraft, now far more advanced and automated, still crisscrossed the cosmos, sending back data and collecting images, but the humans who operated them were no longer solely focused on science. There was a renewed focus on the importance of philosophy, on how science must coexist with existential reflection. It was a constant reminder of what Adrian had learned. Science, when it loses sight of its relationship to mystery and wonder, loses something essential. Space stations orbiting distant planets became centers of deep learning, where scientists and philosophers gathered to discuss not only astrophysical theories, but also the philosophical and spiritual implications of what we were discovering. What does it mean to be part of the universe when we are no longer confined to a single planet? How does our identity change when we know we are not alone in the cosmos? Humanity finally understood that the greatest discovery lay not in the planets they reached or the species they encountered, but in how those discoveries allowed them to see themselves from a new perspective. The cosmos, for all its mystery, had become a mirror for humanity, a place where we could project our deepest questions and our highest aspirations. And so, humanity's mission continued, driven by Adrian's legacy and his eternal curiosity. Humanity's expansion was not only physical, but also mental and spiritual. Every star, every galaxy, every corner of the universe represented not only an empty space to explore, but an opportunity to better understand life, to continue searching for meaning in a cosmos that would never cease to amaze us. The journey to the stars continued, and with it, Adrian's lesson endured. The purpose is not in the arrival, but in the ongoing journey. Humanity, more united than ever by the search for the unknown, understood that true greatness lay not in the answers we could find, but in the ability to keep asking. And so, as the universe unfolded before us, we knew that every step we took into the unknown was ultimately a step toward ourselves.